After original Call of Duty series developer Infinity Ward took the franchise to literal new heights in last year's game Infinite Warfare, it's a little strange that the relative new kid on the block of COD developers, Sledgehammer Games, is the one to actually grab the series by the scruff of its neck and drive it forcefully back to the ground toward its roots. In a lot of ways, that's exactly what's happened with Call of Duty World War II, the 14th main entry in the highly popular first-person shooter series that returns us to the series' inaugural setting. By bringing the series back to the era that initially defined it, Activision and Sledgehammer make a notable declaration about the series and its potential future, but it also presents an interesting conundrum. Can Call of Duty World War II meld together all the innovations added to the series over the past 9 years to drag World War II-era gameplay onto the visual and mechanical capabilities of modern hardware? Let's dive in and take a look. Though the series is jumping back in time upwards of 70 years, it is by default the most graphically advanced game in the entire series. Supporting high dynamic range on PC, Xbox One S and X, and PS4, the blinding sunlight of the European countryside on a display that can support it definitely helps you to feel like you're walking on the European front of the war. The production design of the game is breathtaking and feels like Sledgehammer absolutely did their due diligence in going as far as they could to accurately represent the World War II era. Whether it's the bunkers you storm, the blood in the water, the uniforms, insignia, weapons, or sound effects, Call of Duty World War II absolutely feels true to the era it's charged with representing. While the original Call of Duty games tended to shift between several different player characters across different powers of a conflict, the series is basically stuck to one single player character and protagonist since Sledgehammer Games' first solo effort in the series, 2014's Advanced Warfare. Call of Duty World War II continues this trend by focusing on the exploits of a young US Army private first class named Ronald "Red" Daniels. Much like the now classic Steven Spielberg war epic Saving Private Ryan, the campaign mode for World War II begins on the beaches of Normandy, France on June 6, 1944. You're dropped into the action, storming the beach with other Allied soldiers to begin to retake the Nazi-occupied nation, and the opening battle can only really be described as visceral. Immediately, it becomes clear that you can't go into playing World War II the same way you've played every COD game since 2005. Returning from the original game is non-regenerative health, requiring you to use a medical kit in order to regain some of your hit points lost to oncoming Nazi fire. Where before you may run in with guns blazing like Bruce Willis on steroids, World War II cautions you pretty quickly to choose both where you move and where you shoot with greater precision and care. While the return of non-regenerative health should be a welcome surprise for series loyalists and players looking for a true challenge, the truth is that it's not nearly as unforgiving as it used to be. Right beside you on most missions is a fellow US soldier, Private Zussman, who's ready to toss you a fresh medical kit after a specific cooldown period that changes based on the selected difficulty you're playing, as well as how many enemies you've killed. That makes the returning mechanic a bit watered down when compared with the days of scouring a map to find a precious health boost, as you had to do in the original game, but it still makes enough of a core change to the way that you play that you can't help but notice it. From a narrative perspective, while it probably wouldn't be fair to characterize the story in World War II as anything near groundbreaking, it's a perfectly serviceable tale with a tone and execution that makes it very memorable from moment to moment. Much like other recent COD campaigns, our hero is more reflective and introverted than he is a gung-ho Nazi killer, and that makes for some surprisingly heartfelt moments with fellow soldiers, as well as some appropriate shock when witnessing the brutal horrors of warfare firsthand. Sledgehammer continues their trend of solid character work that they showed us in 2014's Advanced Warfare, and while Red Daniels isn't quite as memorable as some of the people we met in the last Sledgehammer-developed COD game, the continued focus on a single person really does help a more personal story come through in the massive undertaking that was the Second World War. All in all, the return to a World War II-era setting arrives with very positive results. While some elements of overall gameplay developed through recent entries are understandably abandoned, like wall running and perceptive upgrades to name just a couple, Call of Duty World War II makes for an engaging and visceral single-player experience. The visual and auditory authenticity to the era is nearly overriding, replicating the weapons, tools, uniforms, and environments with enough apparent accuracy to put the best filmmakers to the test, and a COD campaign hasn't felt this simply brutal, at least since 2008's World at War. That counts as quite a win in my book. While the locomotion and futurism-inspired character enhancements have been done away with in order to more properly represent the era the game takes place in, World War II does an admirable job in melding together an old-school feel with some decidedly new-school mechanics for the Call of Duty series' most annually popular mode, multiplayer. While there are some core fundamental differences to what we've seen from years past, this is still definitely a Call of Duty game when you go online. Snipers, spawn killers, and mom insults from 10-year-olds all around. Toxic community aside, Sledgehammer's attitude towards multiplayer this time around has a similar back-to-basics approach that seemed to guide the development of the campaign. Doing away with the quasi-futuristic setting brings World War II back to the boots-on-the-ground style of competitive play that series diehards have been clamoring for, but that's not to say that the developers haven't added some new innovations to the mix in order to vary the experience even further. Divisions help players to fall into their most comfortable playstyle right from the get-go, and the addition of a command hub world with specific objectives for you to accomplish in multiplayer modes gives an added element of depth and meaning to the whole experience. While all the typical Call of Duty game modes make their return this year, including Team Deathmatch, Hardpoint Domination, Kill Confirmed, etc., likely the most visible and engaging mode is the new and aptly titled War. Taking a page out of the playbook of the Battlefield series' expansive Operations, War Mode assigns one team of players to accomplish specific narrative-based objectives, while the other team has to actively combat and counter those objectives in order to win the day. In its purest form, it effectively replicates the pandemonium of a real battlefield, and a shared objective beyond simply wiping the other team out can be immensely satisfying for team players that try to do more than play TDM in another guise. Returning from 2008's World at War, the specifically branded Nazi Zombies mode brings back the gritty yet slightly campy sense of humor with a memorable cast and some engaging maps. While some previously long-standing elements of the Zombies game mode have been excised from World War II's offering, they change out the previous perk system with a class loadout for your character and some passive power-ups. The most visible change to the mode, though, is the addition of a new form of currency you can only get by killing zombies: Jolts. Acquiring these Jolts is now pretty much the name of the game here. They'll fund you with new weapons, unlocking doors and character upgrades, and stand as the most visible sign of progress that you'll see as you and your team struggle against each successive wave of the hungry undead coming for your flesh. Call of Duty World War II is, for all intents and purposes, one hell of a homecoming for the entire series. While the quasi-futuristic entries weren't as bad as some of the groupthink out there might make you think, it's easy to see that a return to the inaugural era that the original games first explored over a decade ago has helped to make the Call of Duty series distinctive again. Headlined by a hell of a campaign mode that's likely the most honest feeling and emotional we've seen from the series in years, the visceral violence of this very real historical conflict goes a long way in revitalizing every aspect of the Call of Duty experience. Because of that, it may be the best Call of Duty game since the original Modern Warfare, while also feeling like it's come home after a crazy few years finding itself again out in space. If World War II has set the course for the series for the next few years, then we can't wait to see where it goes next. For more on Call of Duty World War II, including a more in-depth written review, be sure to check out geeksandgamers.com.